everyone. I work for a company called Atos. I will spare you from all commercial details what we do. Just one note, we are the service provider of the Olympic Games. So we are very good in big projects and launching those, but today my talk is more about challenging the status quo. For those active in cybersecurity, you've been doing the same things over and over again for 20, maybe 25 years. And now that we are going into the era of mobility, connected driving, IoT, it seems that we are repeating the errors that we did 20 years ago. And my talk will be to challenge you and think differently in the future. And the first one is, this is how management perceives cybersecurity today. If you talk with executives, this is what they think. We manage, we have everything under control, everything is cool. If you ask them, do you have a cybersecurity issue? The majority will say, no, everything is fine. We know differently, of course. That perception is completely wrong. And why is it wrong? Because this is what we are doing. We are putting in poor, lousy controls that have no clue what they are doing, are badly configured, and operated by people who received poor training at the best. Most of the time, they didn't receive any training. If you look at yourself, how many of you have received a training how to use your PC? I see one hand. That's better than most presentations where I go. So that's positive. But we use those lousy controls and we rely on them. With as a side effect, we have a CISO who's doing this. He's trying to catch all those evil vulnerabilities, and he doesn't have any strategy to do so. At best, he has a budget defined, which is far too low to be successful. And what he does then is ad hoc hunt around when things go wrong. And I hope you will never be in a case where things go wrong, but unfortunately, there will be a day where we are. And when we think about those things, of course, we speak a lot about threats, and I will spare you of all those technical jibber-jabber that we use in our environment. But those threats, who are they? Why are we threatened? And if you look back in history, it was easy. 25 years ago, when I started my career in IT, it were people that were looking for something new. When we connected PCs from all over the world, we were trying to break into the other side, just for curiosity. But that evolved into evil malware, and later into cybercrime, and in the more recent years, maybe even to state-sponsored crime, as you can call it, depending on which side of the border you live. And this is, of course, an evil evolution, because we haven't a lot to do against it. And the other thing we have is we speak always technology. Who thinks cybersecurity is a technology problem? If it's not a technology problem, what would it be then? Speak up, shout. Human issue? People. I think we have an adversary problem. There are just too many of them out there who like to harm us. If you look back in history, it was easy. Not many people had internet in the beginning. Majority were corporations. Not the entire world was connected. So nowadays, we have an adversary problem. Of course, people are sometimes also the problem, but I don't think that's the majority of the issue. Now, another thing is, we know that the threats are there. We still speak about risk. We distinguish very bad between risk and certainties. And in fact, if you look at internet and what we try to protect, the outside evil world, we only look at the surface web for the majority of the cases. Who in this organization or in this room is looking on dark web for vulnerabilities? No one. That's scary, right? Because it happens on dark web today. The majority of the evil stays below the radar, and we are not looking below the radar. We are only looking for the obvious. We are only looking for things that we know, unfortunately. And to understand why we do this, we need to go back in time. We need to understand what we are doing and why we are repeating that evil habit again. And the first one is, we have been building castles for centuries, in medieval times, but also in the cyber times. When we started defending our organizations, we were building perimeters. We were building a virtual castle around our organization. And we use all these great tools, firewalls, malware detection tools, intrusion detection tools, you name it. We have for every problem we think to have a solution. But today, the world isn't like that anymore. And when we were creating this, we thought, now we're safe. And more importantly, the people deciding on how it was integrated were the IT people. Those were not the people deciding on where the business is going. Those were purely IT people, passionate about their job. So sometime later, we thought, we need to make rules. That's fine. Rules are needed, so everybody knows what is accepted and what is not. So we added a layer, security management. And most of you have heard of it by frameworks like the ISO 27000, NIST, or maybe something else. And of course, these define control objectives that you integrate and you make or you apply rules in your organization to obey them. And that's fine, we need that, but it's not sufficient. And unfortunately, these rules are always running behind. So we thought sometime later, we need an extra layer. We need security governance. We need security on the highest layer of the organization, at the board or executive management, which is not the same as security management. And while we did that, we were still talking that same technology jibber-jabber that we did in the early days. Those executives have no clue what a vulnerability is, or malware, or what a firewall does. At best, they know how to use their email program. But they have no clue what protection means. So we find something else. We did security awareness training, and we were telling everyone, you can't do this, don't do that, create passwords like this. Nobody likes that. That's the wrong way of sending the message across. And we are still applying that, though our world has completely changed. Everything today is connected. Who is not connected on the internet? Nobody. I expected that in Estonia. Sometimes in other parts of the world, you will see a few hands of the really paranoid among us. I don't know how long they will survive, but they exist. And while this world is interconnected, we should think differently. And Shane already mentioned it. It's about data today. It's not about building castles. It's about user protection or data protection. And you have become, over time, a data cluster. You are a walking source of data. You have it in your pocket. You run around with it in your home. You use tablets. You use your phone. Your television is connected. These make you a data cluster. Some call it your digital shadow. Others might call it your digital twin, depending on how dark you look at things. But it's important to know that you need to protect that data, and it's very difficult today, because you are requested time and time over again to enter the same private data which you do, and you don't have control on it, or very little control on it. Why? Because, in fact, we don't understand risk. Risk is something very subjective. And I have a small test for you guys to tell me how you feel about risk. Does this look like a dangerous animal? For those not active in marine life, it's a shark. Is this dangerous or not? It might be, right? I agree. it can be dangerous, depending where you swim, where you live, how you behave, etc. This is a vending machine where you get bottles out, candies, sweets. Is that an evil machine? I see somebody nodding. Did they attack you? Hopefully not. But I agree. Because if you compare both of them, in some parts of the world, they cause more deaths than the shark. And I'm not talking about countries where there are no sharks. So there are countries which have more deaths caused by vending machines than by sharks. So you see how subjective risk is if I don't give you the right context. Very difficult to comprehend if you have to talk risk with business people. These people, and no offense, they think in numbers. They think in profit and loss margins. That's how they perceive risk as well. So we need to stop using those wrong models. We need to rethink why building castles is not the right answer to the problem of today. It almost seems if we are addicted to those old models. It's like an addiction if you look at our security architects defining the security for your organization. They come up time and time over again with the same ideas. And I saw some really innovative ideas already here, so I'm optimistic for the future. But to change that idea, we need to understand something. For years, we have focused on what is bad. And we call it, in our terminology, the known bad. These are the evil, scary things we know about. Those prevention tools that we use are the ones that are focusing on that. And if you look at budgets today, these budgets, for the majority of time, are spent on prevention tools. Firewalls, again, those antiviruses you have on your computer or your environments. All those prevention tools take up a lot of budget. And the problem with those prevention tools is, when they fail, you don't get noticed. That's, of course, great, because that gives you a good night's sleep. If they fail, they don't wake you up. Your boss will wake you up, probably, because he has a problem with accessing some server. So we need to rethink about how we define security. We don't need to put all our eggs in the prevention basket. We need to be prepared to detect it soon and be able to respond it when we detect it. And most companies are still on the left side in the big pie chart that you see, where the majority of things are spent on prevention. We need to rebalance that budget and spend more effort in detecting the evil instead of trying to prevent what we cannot prevent, because we don't know it. We need to stop focusing on known bad. And for that, you need to be able to understand what is known good. You need to know what is normal behavior in your organization. And if you don't know that, you only have one option left, and that's known bad. We need to think about behavior in our organization, and that can be any time, any kind of behavior. You need to think how people act in the organization, and I don't mean physically or when they are interacting with you, but on a machine level basis. And if you know that, and you still have the known bad stuff, you will close the gap of the unknown part. And instead of now waiting till evil happens and destroys your company, we are now going to act when we detect a deviation from what we call known good. That's a completely different approach than we do today. We are not waiting until the fire alarm sets off. No, we are going to hunt for suspicious activity before it evolves into a real catastrophe. And if we do that in the right manner, we will close the unknown gap. It will always be there, but the goal, of course, is to keep it as small as possible. And to do that, or to understand your behavior, some simple questions can be asked. When do I log on onto my environment? From where do I log on? Which device do I use? Most probably you use the same devices over and over again. You don't buy every 3 months a new smartphone, hopefully, unless you ruin them all the time, but normally you don't. And for the majority of the people, they log in from, let's say, the same location. See it as country, for example. Of course, in my case, I have the right to travel a lot of my time. These things go crazy. They ask me additional security questions because they doubt my behavior, especially since this is my first time in Estonia. All my accounts ask me, are you sure? Is this you? Can you verify with two-factor authentication? Of course, to do this, you also need to think about machine-to-machine communication, which gets more important. We need to understand why machines are discussing with each other, why data is transferred from one side to another. And if we know that, if we know the reasoning, we can map it to known good. And any deviation of that should set the alarm. And I give you an example. Who doesn't know what SharePoint is? Okay, so imagine your organization uses a SharePoint server. And you see that on a specific SharePoint site, there has been no access for at least 18 months. And suddenly, you see that all data of that specific SharePoint part is flowing away. Somebody is copying it. Instead of just waiting till the phone rings, look, we had a data breach, it's all over in the news. You should hunt for it. Why? Who accessed it? Is this an employee about to leave the company, for example? Bring in correlation, contextualize the facts. If you do that right, you will make this gap smaller. And of course, this is not an easy task. It's way easier to focus on known bad because you buy a product, you click 2 times next, install, confirm, yes, I agree, and you have ease of mind. I agree. But unfortunately for you, life is not to be made easy. So we need to think and think over it because cybersecurity is now a business problem. Even worse, it's becoming a problem of society. It is embedded into our environment today. You can't live without it. And of course, it's fueled by human factor, as some spoke up earlier when I asked the question. Of course, we humans tend to make failures. That's fine. And there was an earlier discussion that somebody said on stage, I trust people more than machines. It depends. Some machines I trust more, but of course we will need to live with it in the future. And our focus should be, why is the damage there? What is damaged? And less on what caused the damage. We are still focusing on the technology side of the issue when something occurs. I see you're very silent, but apparently it's an Estonian thing that I don't understand. But anyhow, if you have questions,